It's week 2 of Mozambique's biggest corruption trial involving the so-called hidden debt of $2 billion. At least 19 people on trial. In fact, 19 people are on trial, including the son of the former president of Mozambique, Armando Guebuza. Also implicated in this matter of the $2 billion hidden debt is the former finance minister, Manuel Chang. He's not on trial in Maputo. He's in jail in Johannesburg here in South Africa. Next week, the Johannesburg High Court, in fact on Wednesday, the 15th, will be hearing his case to stop his extradition to Mozambique. And these things are running parallel at the moment. Let's get the latest now with Professor Adriano Nuvunga from the Center for Democracy and Development in Maputo, Centro de Democracia y Desenvolvimento de Mozambique. Prof, good afternoon and welcome to the Midday View. It's week 2. How has it been going? Just overall, give us an overriding sense. Give our viewers an overriding sense. How is the trial proceeding in Mozambique at the moment?
The trial of Mozambique's, indeed, Africa's biggest corruption case since independence is going very well. But there are a few trends. Number one is that the judge appears to be powerful with the weak and weak with the powerful. For instance, when the son of President Guebuza was seated there at the hearing, he was allowed to behave arrogantly to the point of undermining the authority of the public prosecutor. And more importantly, he was allowed even to ask questions, provocative questions to the public prosecutor. And those questions, they were taken seriously to the point that they were taken to the recordings of the day. And perhaps because his father was there, and the father is former President Guebuza, who will also be in the court on the 2nd of December as declarant, of course, not as defendant, which frustrates the expectations of the people because it clearly emerges that the ones are being tried now, they are small fish, and the big fish, he was there accompanying his son, but not as defendant.
So what's the sentiment? Yeah. So what's the sentiment on the ground then if the judge is perceived to be soft on the powerful like Ndambi Guebuza, the son of the former president Armando Guebuza, and very strong or the so-called weak, the small fish?
The sentiment is of frustration, of course. And the people have a view that although it is important to have these people facing the dock, but ultimately the big fish will not face the dock. Look at what's happening. Another trend is that all defendants, they have been indicating that the incumbent, who at the time of the event was the defense minister, is involved, but all they have difficulties in naming his name. Only the son of former President Guebuza, he clearly said his name, which also it gives you the sense of...
We are talking here about the current president of Mozambique, Filipe Nyusi. He was a defense minister at the time when the scandal was taking place, when this big hidden debt was being acquired and guaranteed by signatures of the likes of Manuel Chang, who's sitting in jail in South Africa currently.
Exactly. So, but people have difficulties in saying the name. But the son of former President Guebuza, he clearly mentioned the name. And that gives also a sense that the two, the incumbent and the previous, they have fell out. And clearly what it is at stake also at the moment is the fight between these two people. Important is some of the revelations. Hey, listen to me. These people have said, for instance, that a private jet was hired to transport tons of first-class wine from Paris to the presidency here in Maputo. it was shocking to people, but to some, it suggests that part of the cash was transported to Maputo in private jet. So there is a lot. Judge Efigeni Batista, he has a lot, not only to limit the current trial to the small fish, but he has a lot to open autonomous cases against the big fish.
Now, if former President Gebuza and the current president, who was a former defense minister, Philippe Nyusi, are on opposing sides, does it mean that Frelimo is now been factionalized?
You know, Frelimo itself, it received about 10 million bribe. You know, in a system like Mozambique, people have to pay to play. So they seem to have clearly paid for that. And Frelimo itself, it should be facing the dock. But ultimately, if Mozambique's democracy was operational democracy in the sense that the will of the people was respected at the ballot boxes, the people would definitely punish Frelimo in the next election.
Okay, the next question is, I want to talk about Manuel Cheng as well, because you are also the chairman of the Mozambican civil society umbrella body that's against corruption called Budget Monitoring Forum. You've got a case pending in Johannesburg in the High Court. You applied to the court here. It's going to be hearing that case, making a ruling next Wednesday. But I want to talk about that as well, very brief. But before we leave the corruption trial itself, answer this one very briefly, if you may, Professor. Do people believe justice will be done?
Yes.
Do people believe justice will be done?
We definitely believe that the judge will do justice. The fact that he asked Minister Lamola to render the process where he made the decision, it's part of the justice being done by the South African justice. Here, we believe, as FMO, that the judge, he will extradite Chang to the States because Mr. Changi is a potential witness and he does not qualify to be extradited because only convicted people, on those who are going to stand trial, they can be considered in the position of being extradited. That's in the case of Manuel Chang.
Okay, so you're confident that come Wednesday, the Johannesburg High Court will rule in favor of your application and extradite Mr. Cheng to the US and not to Mozambique?
Absolutely, that Mr. Changi will not come to Mozambique next week.
Thank you very much. That's Professor Adriano Nuvunga. He's, of course, an executive director of the Center for Democracy and Development in Maputo, but also he's the chairperson of one of Mozambique's biggest civil society forum, that's anti-corruption. They are against corruption. They have filed this application with the Johannesburg High Court a few weeks ago after Ronald Lamola, the Minister of Justice here, had in fact said Mr. Manuel Cheng, the former finance minister of Mozambique, can be extradited back home to Mozambique. They are saying, no ways. He must go to the United States and face the music there. He's been indicted there in relation to this biggest corruption trial in Mozambique. $2 billion of hidden debt that he signed off years ago without parliamentary approval. And they got the money and there were bribes being paid left, right and center. It's a big issue of corruption. Thank you very much to Adriano Nuvunga. We'll have to wait and see what happens in the Johannesburg High Court on Wednesday in relation to Manuel Cheng's extradition case. He seems confident that he's not going back to Mozambique. He'll be extradited to the US.